Please welcome to the stage Sharu Jain of Alaska Airlines, Andrew Reiskin with Mastercard, and Fiona Tan from Wayfair. Sure. Thank you. Have a seat. No particular order. All right. Thank you guys for coming here. We're talking about customer service is huge for a lot of your different organizations, and how data is playing a major role. So I want to set the stage for everyone here and talk about how you're using data to help with that customer experience and even beyond that. So Fiona, I want to start with you. You had mentioned earlier there's different customer data and then there's company data. So explain the difference in what you're using over at Wayfair.
Yes. So as you know, Wayfair, we're a digitally native e-commerce. We sell furniture, home goods mostly. And so there are different ways that we use data to solve for our customer experience. So one of the things about shopping for the home category, hopefully some of you have been on our site, but it is one where the customer doesn't always know what they want to look for, right? So it's not like shopping for six-pack AA batteries. It's pretty clear, Duracell, whatever. You can very clearly articulate what you want. When you're shopping for home goods, it's a lot harder. A green couch, so many green couches, etc. So for us, we use a lot of the data that we've collected about our customers in aggregate as well as individually for each customer to help us understand what the customer means when they say green couch, because I know, what have they shopped for before. I can kind of glean the style preferences, the maybe the price points, etc. Right? So it's really how do I use that in addition to sort of your semantic search, right? We've been built on top of BERT's LLMs for quite some time. How do I marry that data together to give you a really personalized experience based on sort of like the aggregate and individual data that we have? I think the other part too, you mentioned around, it's sort of company data, but it's also, for example, our product data, right? So everything that we get from our suppliers about the items that are in our catalog, again, same thing, right? That's where we need to sort of extract out as much understanding as we can from it. And at the end of the day, it's that matchmaking process between a customer that isn't always that articulate about what they want to product that, again, when you get it from suppliers, they may not also be as articulate as you would like them to be about their product. So it's like, how do you enrich both sides? And there's a lot of AI that's powering the data that we have around enriching, augmenting, and then you do this matchmaking. And you do all that, hopefully, to find your green couch. After all that. Right?
After all that. And we'll get to the AI too in just a bit. Sharu, you talked about 3 areas. You spoke about operations, revenue, and the customer. So break all those down for us.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me here. At Alaska Airlines, we have a lot of data. So we have a lot of data around revenue, meaning which flights, where are we making money, what fares, and those change over time. So how do we sell the right product at the right time and don't run out of seats at the end when somebody might want to buy them? And then we have a lot of operations data. So we have about 1,300 flights a day. Each of them take about 50 minutes to turn. We collect about 70 points of data during that 50 minutes to really be able to tell, is the flight going to leave on time or what the challenges are. But the most important is customer data. So what do our customers prefer? What has their experience been? Fiona talked about a lot of the digital customer experience. Obviously, we're using your preferences to make sure we're serving you, what you want to buy. But for us, for Alaska Airlines, care is at the heart of everything we do. And so our employees are incredible. They're sort of the secret sauce. So how do we enable them to be even, do a better job than they do today? And so we've taken... we've married our operations and customer data. So there were 2 challenges in doing this. First was we knew a flight was delayed, but we wouldn't know that the 200 people on that flight were delayed, right? Because that was separate data. So we merged the 2. So now if a flight is delayed or canceled, we know that all the people in that flight were delayed. The second was the touch points with our employees. So you may book your flight online, and then you may call reservations and have a conversation with them. And then you walk in and you check in and you may talk to a customer service agent. And then on the flight, you talk to a flight attendant. So how do they know you? How do they know you're the same person? So we're putting that experience of, what's happened with you, what your experience has been with us in the hands of our employees. So on a flight, our flight attendants are able to see, what's your mood, right? How do you feel about Alaska Airlines? Because you've been canceled or you've been delayed or your bags have been lost. And they're able to then approach you and say, I'm sorry this happened, what can I do? Or whatever way they figure out to do service recovery. And it's pretty remarkable because it could be 2 weeks after your flight that somebody comes up to you on the next flight, somebody that wasn't on your flight and knows that about you. So it's really giving them the tools to personalize that customer experience. So you feel like you're known, like we know you, versus you're just another person on the flight.
Andrew, you have a little bit of a different experience from the other two companies. You said that data provides insight to your customers about their customer. Explain that.
Sure. So most of you, many of you, I should say, have Mastercard branded cards in your wallet, but Mastercard's not the issuer of them. You instead bank with the likes of Citibank, Bank of America, Cap One. They're the ones who actually do the underwriting and assume the risk for the credit. But Mastercard provides the connectivity for them so that it works at a merchant. And we provide a lot of services to make sure that it's safe and secure, because we want to make sure that it is safe and secure for you as a consumer, that you don't experience fraud. And we've all, I'm sure, experienced fraud and gotten those lovely notices over the years. So the data we have is that transactional data asset. Doesn't include anybody's actual name or address in that data. It said it's where you shopped, the amount you shopped. And so we use that data first and foremost to make sure our bank's customers, our financial institution customers, their people are safe and secure. We want to make sure that the banks understand, hey, this looks like a fraudulent transaction, or, hey, I just went on a once-in-a-lifetime trip to Paris, wedding anniversary. I want to make sure my card works so that I can go to the fancy restaurant and go to all those experiences. So we want it to work and not show up as fraud. So that's a great customer experience that we should make sure that happens, because I'm sure we've all been in situations where the card gets declined, and it's a really bad feeling. You're kind of embarrassed. It makes you feel like the criminal. So I would say that is a very important thing we provide as a service to our customers. Another big service we provide are personalization services. So we actually are one of the biggest loyalty program providers in the country, as well as we have services that provide, within digital context, personalization. So I get a sense of what do customer segments look like. Do people who go shopping in this one type of merchant in this one location also go shopping at another? So I can help our merchant partners with their business problems and say, here are some suggestions for you to do. Here are some offers that we've seen work in other contexts that increase spend. So those are typical examples of how we use data. We always have to make sure we're actually using it for the benefit of the individual. We make a promise, we have it stated publicly, that we are going to only use the data for the benefit of the individual. So that's where we think of these things to say, how are we helping the person? We're providing personalized services. We're making sure they're safe and secure.
Now, I want to play off with you the next question, since it goes along what you're saying. With large amounts of data, you get more challenges. So how are you using AI to help with those challenges? Because you said something interesting. You said Mastercard's using AI to improve the data. You put it in those words specifically. Sure.
So many of you are probably aware the number of places where you can use cards has increased exponentially over the last couple of years. Right? There's now touchless commerce in many cases. 10 years or 15 years ago, there wasn't e-commerce, right? And so our network enabled the e-commerce. And so there are all these new acceptance locations. They all now have data points in the sense of you can now sign up through a lot of these online marketplaces and sign up as a merchant to sell something in probably about 5-10 minutes. And so we're always having to keep on top of it. So you as a consumer, when you get that card statement, you go, where did I spend $50? What was this? I'm sure we've all experienced that, right? And so that's a huge amount of data we're constantly collecting, and the data quality issue keeps getting more challenging. So we're using AI to stay on top of it, and we're constantly changing the AI that we're using. So as we move from the world of machine learning and what we learn today to move on to generative AI, because generative AI can understand Andrew's Pizza Shop in plain English, as opposed to old-style machine learning, maybe not, right? Especially when it was concatenated to PZA. And so in many of those cases, we are using AI to improve the quality of that data to make it more usable by our customers and better experience for consumers.
Fiona, how is Wayfair using AI to kind of help with those large amounts of data?
Yeah, so one of the problems that we have at Wayfair is, having grown up digitally native, but in an era where it was very database-centric, is we have a lot of data that is locked up in sort of multi-user databases that are very tightly coupled to our application systems. And for those of you that have that problem, you know it's an awful thing to go after because the databases are not well documented. Most of the people have since left. The schemas are just all over. It's a mess, right? So one of the things we've actually been able to do is actually we work pretty closely with Google on this. But if you think about it, the way that you would describe a database and the schema, et cetera, I mean, a lot of it is sort of very language-like, or SQL is, again, very language-like. So we've actually used some of the generative AI capabilities and trained it on the databases, these large databases that we have, and we've been able to get sort of the documentation almost of the databases, and then we've been able to sort of take that whole legacy database to sort of cloud native, more cloud native database process, and really use generative AI to kind of power the whole thing. So that's been something that we've been really excited about because otherwise it would have taken us a lot longer to do. In the normal autonomous ways that you could do it, there was really, again, the understanding of the database was something that we were able to do a lot better once we had the generative AI capabilities. And as the token windows get larger, it gets better and better for us to be able to get that understanding. So that's been a pretty big key for us.
And Chabru, you had mentioned that Alaska Airlines recently added some Gen AI capabilities as well.
Yes, so we have lots and lots of data, and an example I'll give you is when you're looking to fly somewhere. So today we engage with our guests more when you've decided, oh, I want to go somewhere. This is the time frame. I'm just looking for the best flight. So how do we start engaging with you more upper funnel and to the left, and really when you're thinking about travel, or inspire you and spark that interest of travel with you. So we've launched Gen AI capability recently that you're very easily able to, ask for, okay, where can I go in the summertime to do an amusement park, or I want to go to the warm beach for family of four for under $500, right? So it's going to come back and give you options, and you can then look at why are these options served to me, and then you can go right away and book. So what we've seen is when guests come to our website, they usually about 16 to 17 times go back and forth or come back because they're still investigating. So we're really looking for how does that cut down your time to say there's almost like a personal assistant who's looking at all of that data for you and then offering you the best option for you and giving you options to go from, and then you can refine from there. So again, that saves time for you, and it'll result in better conversion, faster conversion for us.
You said, because this ties into our next question about the return on investment. So you're investing in in AI, which everyone knows is an investment. It's not cheap, but how do you get the best bang for your buck out of it? It leads me to one of the questions from our audience. It was from Charles Schwab. They want to know how can you ensure that it's utilized in a way that promotes growth. So along those lines, and what you were just talking about, Charu, do you see that more people are booking because it's easier for them? What kind of return are you seeing?
Yeah, no, that's the hypothesis. And, the traditional AI and even Gen AI, a lot of efficiency and productivity use cases are being talked about in terms of supporting customer service or, getting insights out of large amounts of data, or being able to, coding is one that everybody talks about, software engineering. But this particular case, the hypothesis is it saves you time and it'll increase revenue. So we've launched it very recently, and we're watching it. We have a little bit of traffic going into this, but we have the hypothesis that it will drive revenue and growth for the company and also help our guests. So at the end of it, it's all about if we don't help you, you're not going to book there. So.
And Fiona, for Wayfair, is it more productivity, efficiency, or how are you seeing a return on the investment?
Yeah, very, very similar to what Charu was saying. Certainly, those are your two use cases, right? One around like how can you supercharge your organization, whether it's coding, customer service, obviously, and some of the other areas. We've also found some of the other sort of non-tech areas are really very, very well suited to generative AI. So I think our legal team's been using it quite a bit, finance, accounting, and actually there's some interesting use cases that you can get out of it. The other part is really, what can you do with the customer experience that really changes, that is game changing, given these capabilities? And so I think similar to what you were trialing, we have a trial product as well that's off the main site for now, but it's called Decorify. But basically what you can do there is you can upload a picture of a room in your house, your living room or your dining room, etc. And then what it'll do is it'll use generative AI. In this case, it's generative imagery, so it's like text to image generation. And what it can do is it can take the furniture you currently have in your room out and actually replace it with generated settings, like furniture, depending on, and it'll do it in like 8 different styles, right? Because there are so many styles out there. Apparently that Hollywood glam, I mean, that is a style.
That's a style.
And so then you can see, you can envision your room in this generated world, in this generated, but it's still your room, generated pieces of furniture. And then what we have is we do a match from what's generated to what we have in our catalog. So then if you say, hey, look, I actually really like Hollywood glam, and I can show you the items in my catalog that match what you're seeing, and then that's where, you know, you can then go, when you click on that, it goes into the Wayfair website, you can purchase it. So what we're finding is that, you know, folks that are actually coming to Decorify are converting better. You know, I think partly it's just being able to imagine, right? I think that's a part that's really neat about this, is you can see your own room in a bunch of different styles, and you can see the real world products that you can buy that match that. And it's been, you know, it's been a nice, it's still, you know, it still hallucinates some, so we don't have it yet on our main site. We're trying to figure out how to make sure that it gets to a point where, you know, we feel like it's good to incorporate into the experience, but it's coming. I mean, that's the thing, that's the tech, and you know, tech's changing and improving so quickly that
Right.
I think those are things we need to look out.
By the way, I'm going to thank you when my daughter comes to me and takes a picture
yeah.
of a room and has a
You
list
can have
of
it done
things.
in like
See?
Barbie style too.
Barbie
Yeah.
style, thank you. You mentioned challenges, so I want to talk about some of the challenges with Gen AI that you might see that maybe you've experienced or maybe you've found an example for how to fix it. Because some people here might be saying, you know what, I want to get into AI. Tell me something. What would you warn me about, or what would you tell me some of those challenges are ahead of time? Angela, let's start with you.
Sure. So I would say, so we stood up about 5-6 years ago an AI governance group that I'm responsible for, and so we had instituted a formalized process for the data scientists to go through about evaluating the data for bias and quality, ensuring that the model was checked for bias and quality, had model monitoring. So we had that in place. And then when Gen AI come, like the headlines hit and everybody kept reading about the hallucination, airline tickets being offered for $1, right? Those kind of fun stories that hit the news. And everybody said, whoa, what are we doing? And we said, no, we will stand for responsible innovation. That is what we as an organization will stand for. So we're not locking down Gen AI, but we're going to do it responsibly. So we stood up a specific committee to do the reviews of any and all use cases to say, does this make sense? Because a lot of times people just try things just for the sake of trying them, when good old machine learning would have done the case. So you need to double check that's not really what's happening, and instead try to figure out where are the useful use cases, where's the data good enough to do this, and then most importantly, what are the controls? And so the controls, for the most part, I would just acknowledge at this point, is human in the loop. That nothing is going out the door before a human has reviewed it. So, for example, one of the use cases for efficiency's sake was marketing tagline creation. Okay, nobody's going to release a marketing tagline before the humans and the lawyers review it, right?
Yes.
I would say the one use case that was kind of cool that sort of relates to where Wayfair is that our team that does a lot of personalization for retailers, what they did is they would take in the retailer's product catalog, and then from one side of it, they would take the images and generate better product descriptions for them. Yep. And then similarly, from the English language text, they would take the query from a customer and turn it back into the image. And so therefore, it was a very defined set because the image had to be a product in the catalog. And so the LLM was trained that you couldn't actually do something that was a hallucination. So we had a control in place that we all said, okay, we can release this out to the wild because we had it boxed in. Mm-hmm. I will tell you, I was at an event with one of the large foundation model providers. You can imagine which one. I will leave it to your imagination. With one of their premier financial services clients, and they were touting, this is great, it's better than humans, and humans make mistakes, and these things will make mistakes. The financial services guy got up there and he said, yeah, we love using this, But I'm not stopping a human from not having it without a human in the loop at this point. The technology just isn't there quite yet. And so I would say from, financial services, we are in certain ways conservative, which I think is probably a good thing for consumers. Protect your money. But therefore, as we are doing this, we are being somewhat conservative of what we're going to release and not have that human in the loop. So I would say that is just an important consideration here of when do you get to that point beyond where there's going to be a human in the loop.
I want to expand on that human in the loop
Okay.
in just a bit, but hold tight on that thought because I like where you're going with that. Shari, you had mentioned as far as challenges when it comes to it, training the data, tweaking models, like some of these processes are a little bit time consuming. Expand on that.
Yeah, and like any consumer brand and brands like ours, the trust that we have with the guest, you don't want to break that. So it's very important. We've been doing the Gen AI work internally facing for a long time, or as long as it's come out, which is very recent. But putting it in front of the consumer has taken a while to make sure that we take care of the hallucinations and other things. So we've grounded it in our data. So the model can go and look for all of these destinations and why it's the right place. But we actually make a call to our schedule and our price before we put it in front of you. So we get away from the $1 tickets or all of those scenarios. And we've also developed something that's I'm very excited about from an innovation point of view. It weighs the responses between the human and the models and is able to rate them and then kind of make sure that the right responses are being put forward so we don't break that trust. But as we've been on this journey, we found there were about 7 or 8 steps that had to be taken to get to this point, starting from where should we apply this? Where's the best place to do it? All the way from then, where's the data? Do we have good data to feed into it? And then training the model and then learning from it. And sometimes that loop between the data and training the model and going back and adding more data and training it again has been where it's been interesting because we were talking earlier about customer support, customer assistance, marketing, software engineering. It's been relatively very, very, very easier to do. But aviation safety, right? So if you give it a lot of data about aviation safety, the model's not used to that. It takes a lot more time for it to learn the acronyms and what's really behind it to be able to make any sense of that data. So that's where we've gone back quite a few times and are now seeing some trends that in a large amount of data, it's very important to see.
And Fiona, what challenges have you seen over at Wayfair from Gen AI specifically?
Yeah, no, I think, again, as we were all talking about, you definitely still want to make sure that you have humans in the loop. So for example, in our case, for the customer service agents, we're using it to help assist with summarizations and sort of a response generation. And even if the response quality is high, right, and we've done the tests, and a lot of times it actually does quite well from a quality perspective, we still have the agent there as the gatekeeper to ensure that it's actually correct before it goes out. I think one interesting thing that we did find, and this is going to be, I think, an ongoing sort of change management training thing that we have to do with employees as well, is that a lot of times what's generated, and again, if you generate once, twice, 3 times, for the most part, it'll keep doing it differently. And the agents are like, well, that doesn't sound like me, right? And so sometimes they actually end up spending more time editing it to make it in their voice than actually taking the factually correct generated response. So those are things that we're learning along the way. It's even though it's correct, it's like, how do you now evaluate the quality of the responses, and maybe you say, hey, look, actually I can train it to response in, say, the Wayfair voice, and maybe that's good. We don't need to have everybody have a certain style and voice added to the response. So this is something that we didn't have to worry about before. Now we've given this tool, and the service agents are seeing it, they like it, but at the same time they're like, well, it doesn't sound like me. So now I spend all my time making it sound like me.
And that's why you talk about, okay, so let's get to the human in the loop. So just expand on that a little bit, because sometimes people are, they worry, they hear AI, they think, oh, maybe, that's going to take my job. Or what's your take on keeping that human in the loop?
Yeah, I think the way we're thinking about it is to make the human more productive, right? And they can do more, and this will help them provide, for example, you mentioned a little bit of this as well, and we started doing it even before generative AI, but providing them all the background information about the customer, like suck it all in so that they can make better informed decisions. And now it's like you have all this data, and you're actually going to come up with the first response that's generated first, but they still have the ability to take a look at it and go, yeah, that makes sense. Or as you are having the conversation, with the customer, you have still got the leeway around like, hey, look, I'm going to offer you X amount of refund. You can always query and say, hey, look, what's my total balance, and the LLM can help you with that. But you can still, take that last decision spot, right? And I think anywhere that you find that there is more certainly risk areas is that's where you want to make sure that you have a lot of humans in the loop, or the autonomous stuff doesn't really just make it up there without some kind of human in the loop, right? So I think you have to kind of look at these scenarios where there's very, very low risk. Maybe you can do more trials with totally autonomous responses, but anything that's beyond that, you want to make sure that the humans still, at least that's how we're looking at it.
Yeah. Does this resonate with you, Andrew? I mean, how do you find that right balance?
I think it's going to depend upon the product, is my take on it, and the audience, right? I would also point out to the point where B2B2C is, in a B2B context, you could probably be a little looser in some of these things, where if you have a trusting customer, right, if the customers are a bank, then the bank's going to know, hey, there's a problem here, and they're going to call us up and say, there's a problem, please fix it. As opposed to in a consumer situation, I think it's a higher risk situation, and your risk tolerance is going to have to be a bit different. So in your customer service example, right, is if I have a customer service tool that I'm presenting to a bank, well, if there's a mistake, they're going to call me and say, hey, this isn't working. Yeah. Okay, fine, it's not a high risk situation. But if I'm presenting airline fares, right, as I was suggesting to a consumer, you are going to be in a very different place. You're going to make sure that, no, this is exactly right. So that's where, as we are looking at this, context matters. Yeah. It really does. One of the first things we do as part of our governance program is to capture what is this use case, and make sure the business has defined the use case really tightly, because otherwise you're going to be in these places where the model was trained to do one thing and now they're going to use it for something else. And as you heard in the safety example, that creates problems. And so I would say that is how we are thinking of this, that it is very context dependent.
And Charu, I know I love to speak to a human. So how are you guys keeping that human in the loop too?
Yeah, I think for us, the human in the loop is very, very important. We stand about care, and people provide that care. And that always comes first before any automation. And, there's things humans do better, and there's things computers do better. So how do we automate sort of the transactional and the repetitive stuff, and really have the humans offer that delight and joy and that moment of surprise, so they can do their things with people who actually need help? So that's how we look at it, is, scanning a bag to take it in is a very repetitive transactional thing. So let's automate that part of it. But the thing of helping a family who needs help, or a big group, or somebody that has a question, let's make sure our people are available for that.
So it frees up their time to kind of...
To really do their magic.
Do their magic.
Yeah.
Exactly. We have probably like 2 minutes left. Where do you see the future of this going? I mean, Andrew, what are you excited about? What are you looking forward to as far as Gen AI is concerned?
I think it will take a lot of mundane tasks out of the hands of our employees and free up our employees to do more creative thinking. And as such, we're going to look for, one of the big things that we want out of it is not just the efficiencies that we all know that's where most of us are right now, but where are the net new products, where are the net new experiences? Because as I've seen where you can now spin up video in 2 minutes and create narrations in 30 seconds, and it could be translated into many different languages in very short time frames. You can change experiences for consumers very quickly, right? And so I can keep introducing new things to consumers, excite consumers, and I as a consumer want that. Why do I want the same static website every day, right? I instead would be fascinated if when I go to my e-commerce websites, they're giving me different experiences on a daily basis. It would make me want to go back to them more. So that's where I'm looking at it. There is a brave new world, and you're hearing a lot of our concerns. But I think from an experiential standpoint, as a human being, as a consumer, I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
So too, and that's kind of where you see with Decorify, like it's changing that whole experience. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you guys so much for
thank you for having us.
Thank you. One more time for our panel. Thank you.